Monday, May 23rd, 2022. I'm Steven Sersky. This here is my language vlog, wherein I talk a little bit about what it's like to be learning different languages and go over some of the resources that are available to us students and educators of learning different languages and teaching them as well. Today's topic, I was going to look into becoming something that I think a lot of people become, if they're language students, they become it not by a direct method. They fall into it because someone asks them, "Hey, you know this language, you know that language. Could you do this? Could you translate this document? Could you, sit here and help us translate some things just between us two or something like that?" And I'm talking about the jobs of becoming a translator and an interpreter. Now, these jobs are not the same. I've thought about becoming a translator and an interpreter, like officially as well, but I've never taken the steps to go for it. And I will talk a little bit about why I haven't done that today. But one of the things I was curious about, and I've looked into becoming these things, there are certain requirements to becoming translators, interpreters, and such people that work with the conduitness of two languages or more. I can't say it's one of those things that's really, it's not advertised in a lot of language schools. Typically, especially if you're an English teacher, you're going to become that you're focusing more to become an educator rather than a translator and interpreter. The interpreters or the people that I know that and I've met who work in that field often aren't just translators or just interpreters. They're often a trio of things, a combination. So they do translation work, interpretation, and they teach as well. They might also write or things like that. But basically, these jobs, it doesn't seem like it's a profession that you would choose to go into study languages for. It's something that you're able to do if you're good at languages. Now, I don't want to discourage people from taking up, the challenge of going through the gauntlet of what it becomes, what needs to happen in order for you to become an official translator and interpreter. And I want to make that point because I need to clarify that, because what I'm going to look at today, there's a few websites I'm going to take a look at. The idea is that if you are a translator or an interpreter, it's that you are accredited, you're certified by some sort of either national body or international body that recognizes the standard certifications that you have. And these aren't given out just to anybody. Just because you know two languages doesn't mean that you could do translation work, nor could you always be an interpreter. You could be a teacher, but likewise, I mean, we know that people apply for jobs, and some people are a better fit for the job than others. So with that, that's what I want to take a look at, is some of the qualifications, what's necessary, what you need to do, and who might you work for if you are a translator or an interpreter. For language students, one of the things that we kind of have to keep in mind is that, especially, as an educator as well, but as a language student, it's good to have a goal in mind. And one of the things that I've thought about that would be great to be able to do is do simultaneous interpretation, which is probably one of the hardest types of interpretation going on. And by simultaneous interpretation, what's happening is that you'd be sitting in at either a conference or a meeting or between two individuals, and you'd be hearing what one person says, and you'd be speaking it to the next person at the same time. So typically, in a conference situation, you might be, in a glass box somewhere with headphones on and a microphone in front of you, and you're listening to what the person is saying, and you're translating into the earpiece for someone else or for the people who need to know. That one's very difficult because you do have to be fluent. You have to, not just your native language, but in your target language as well. And as far as I can tell, most of the people that started or who are in those jobs grew up in a dual language environment. It's not as common to find people who took on a second language or a third language and then got into the job, like with the idea that they would become an interpreter later on. More, it was that they grew up in a dual language or a dual cultural household, and then with that skill set, as they got older, the opportunity presented itself to become translators or interpreters. One of the things I want to, becoming a translator and interpreter, it's not just about interpreting what you hear, not just translating, because there's a certain amount of judgment or non-judgment you need to use in your job. For example, in a conference, if people are getting heated in a heated discussion and they are using some words that might not be so nice, as an interpreter, you can't be affected by that. You have to. Your job is to translate and interpret as needed, rather than to be offering any opinion on what's happening. Now, there might be a situation where your client might ask you what do they mean by that, and you can interpret typically what the language means, but you're not really adding anything to the conversation. You are clarifying a language point rather than clarifying any sort of bigger or greater meaning. Now, in that situation, it can be very dicey, and you do have to have your own emotional control, because you are hearing someone get angry, and you have to translate this or interpret this for another person, and the other person can either hear or see it happening, and your job is as a conduit to simply relay the message. That's it. And it can be, so that's one of the parts of being able to be an interpreter or a translator, is to be able to sit through things like that and understand that it's not personal, and that you're just doing your job of translating the languages as it's given to you. I did a very years ago, back in 2020, when the epidemic started, I actually took it upon myself to do a course in translation. It was an introduction. Working with translation. It was on Futurelearn.com. It was a good introduction to the idea of becoming a translator. And one of the things that they have a website here, and they put it on, it's put on by Cardiff University. And Cardiff University is pretty famous as they're one of the universities that offer a lot of online courses for this type of work. But they have a page here that talks about translators versus interpreters and some of the differences that happen. Now, they have 3 columns here. It's translators, translators, and interpreters. So the biggest difference is that the real timeness. So interpreters are usually acting on the moment, at the spot, right at the same time, in real time. Translators might have time to make notes and go through things and look up different things, different words or different meanings, whereas interpreters might not always be given that same sort of leeway with their time. The other thing is that, like with translators, they have to read a text typically, and they have to translate not just the language but the meaning of the language as well, so that they're able to present the best translation possible in a reading situation. With interpreters, not only the same idea applies, but they're not only hearing from one person and going to another person, they're hearing what that other person says and then going back to the original person as well. So they're here on the website, they have A to B and A to C and vice versa, B to A and C to A. So it's it's a lot more fluid and a lot more back and forth. Translators, excellent research skills, whereas interpreters need a bit more cultural knowledge, cultural awareness, so they understand, like, if someone uses an idiom, how do you translate an idiom? And this is, how do you interpret an idiom that the other party will understand? And that it's a skill. And you have to be aware that maybe the words that are said in an idiom might not be best conveyed in the exact language. You might have to change it or find that cultural connection that says something very similar. And the the yeah the other thing with the interpretation is that you have to have excellent short-term memory and the ability to translate these idioms, colloquialisms, and cultural specific items as well. So it's but the short-term memory is probably the biggest challenge, because there sometimes words can come at you very quickly and you have to be hearing it, and the idiom is spoken or something that is specific to a culture's language, and then you have to be able to switch into it, or change it into your target language. So I'll put this link up there for you guys to take a look at futurelearn.com. It's one of the courses, Working with Translation, and it's very informative because it breaks down the differences between it, but it also starts getting into the three types, or the different types of translations and interpretation. So one is how do you say this? Chukotage, chukotage, no idea. Chukotage. A particular type of simultaneous interpreting, where you as an interpreter are sitting beside your client, basically, and you're hearing what's being said and you're translating or interpreting for your client who's right beside you. Consecutive interpreting, which is probably a little bit easier because you can listen, take notes, and then respond, like not respond, but you then relay the translation afterwards. And then liaison interpreting, which is they say it's the least formal type of interpreting, where it's ad hoc interpreting, and mostly for business meetings or informal interactions, on the street or between in the hallway, sort of thing, I guess you would say. Here you're allowed a little bit more time to, so someone will speak and they'll let you as the interpreter go through what needs to be said and then relay the message that way. And this is, so it's one of these things where you're given a little bit more time. You might not take notes, but you will be given some time to to think about the best way to say something. Apparently not here in Europe, but in Europe there's a fourth category, but I don't think this is just Europe. I think this is actually all over the place. There's court or sworn interpreters, and this is the same in Canada, the United States. Canada, we have them, where it's a lot of what you're doing is, what would you call it? Not classified, but there's a security concern, right? So more secure, you have to follow certain protocols, and you basically aren't allowed to talk about your work, which, you know what? It's actually a pretty good restriction, because you're like, you go home, you leave work at work, and you go home and you go do your other thing. I know, yes, in those situations, the judiciary system, police, or with the other authorities, you are probably going to hear some things that might not make you feel very good. And a lot of people, again, going on to the idea, can anyone do interpretation? It's not always possible. Some people might not like being in that situation, hearing those things. You do have to have sort of a wall in front of you, a metaphorical wall, that you're able to step away from the content and translate it, because you do need to be able to offer that service. Someone has to, so that the judicial system or the police can figure out what's going on. So there is that need for, no matter how bad it is, the information still needs to be translated or given over. And this is, they end this page with the translator interpreter training, and that this has been something that I've come across a few times. And this one on Futurelearn is more UK specific and Europe specific. They give a few places that you can take a look at, namely the Institute of Translation and Interpreting's MITI Qualified Member Status for translators, and the DPSI Diploma in Public Service Interpreting, and then also the Chartered Institute of Linguists, DipTrans, Diploma in Translation. And all of those places, and so this gets into the qualifications of what it means to become an official translator, an official interpreter. Just because you know two languages doesn't mean you can translate, doesn't mean you can interpret. It means that you could start the process and not only see if you're able to do it, but see if you like doing it, because you might not like doing it. And that's a very important thing to keep in mind, that if you one of those awkward situations where someone's getting mad, or you especially the courts, like if you're working in courts as sworn interpreters, you probably already have a disposition that's sort of like you can block yourself away sort of thing. But any other sort of, if maybe between colleagues, I mean, that's a lot more informal. You can translate things, so it's and like on the spot. That would be your informal translation work, and good practice just to see if you're interested in the mentality that's needed in order to actually complete the job. Okay, so moving on to what some of the requirements are. Working as a translator or an interpreter typically requires some sort of certification from an official body, and the ones I mentioned already for Europe and the UK. So you have the Chartered Institute of Linguists. You have Institute of Translation and Interpreting. You could look at the UN website. That would probably be your biggest website for in terms of links to where you could get training courses on these things. Canada has a few links. The United States, obviously, as well. And the idea is that, but with Canada, I have found, I'm not sure if it's the same in the United States or in Europe, but in Canada, the national body acts as sort of a conduit between all of the provinces, all the provincial bodies. And you have to apply to the provincial body in order to become accredited and then get certified sort of nationally, which then opens up the ability to go, I guess, work at the UN or other professional authority positions in Canada. Training isn't free. You might have to take a course. You probably will have to take a course. Taking a look at some of these CIOL, so the Chartered Institute of Linguists Qualifications, Level 7 Diploma in Translation, so the DipTrans, you have to take an exam. It's only put on in certain times. This one's actually, what is this? This is the translation one. This one it's full registration, all 3 units. So there's 3 units that they give you. Unit 1 is a written translation of a general text. Unit 2, translation of a semi-specialized text in a technology, business, or literature context. And then Unit 3 is the semi-specialized text in science, social science, law, or arts and culture context. All total, you can buy all 3 for full registration for all 3 units for £650. So that's what, 1,200 Canadian dollars, about $900 US or something. Of course, you can do some of the stuff online as well. But you need to take something along those lines where you have to pass a test and achieve a certain score in order to be an accredited translator, and that's a translation, not interpretation. Interpretation is separate. Interpretation, so the CIOL qualifications for the Level 6 Diploma in Public Service Interpreting, 5 units total. Full exam registration are £715, so that'd be what, 1,500 Canadian or so, 1,100 American US dollars, and that would be a different type of exam. Now they don't really give me too much info on what the exam involves, but you probably have to. It's probably similar. General context, specific context, and then I guess some sort of specialization or something like that. One of the things I thought about doing was actually just becoming a member, because then you could just get access to some of the information that they have, and it's not a bad idea. It's actually not so bad. One of the things that I'm seeing here on this website, the CIOL, the Chartered Institute of Linguists website, is that you actually have to become a member in order to become a certified translator or interpreter, which means it's extra money that you have to put out, that you're putting out before you're actually making cash. Or as you're making cash, but you have to pay for membership anyways. Student affiliates are free because they have no money or not supposed to. Study affiliates, it's only £27 for an annual membership fee. And what that means is that you're basically working towards becoming someone who's working in the industry. So student, you're probably at school. Study means you probably graduated. Or you're closing into being, finishing your degree, your subject, your studies. Career affiliate, that means you're basically already into the game and you are working as a translator or interpreter. The fees go up, of course. You have to pay an assessment fee, so someone will actually check whether or not you know what you're doing. And then the annual membership fee is £90. And then the associate, member, and fellow all need assessment fees, and their annual membership fees go up further. Now, those associate, member, and fellows, those are all different levels that basically refer to how much work you do as a translator. They do have a document that you can, let's see, become a chartered. Nope, you have to become a member in order to see that on the website. So those three levels, they refer to how many hours you put in, basically, whether it's like you're holding research positions or something at a university that deals with translation and things like that. And what this membership does for both the translation and the interpretation fees that you're paying is that you are by getting this membership, you're part of a standard, an internationally recognized organization that has a certain amount of criteria that you have passed, that someone else says, yes, they're able to do this. And that way, if you should go apply for a job at the UN or some other international body, or for your government or for a business, you can say that you hold this membership. So it's kind of like a pass card of sorts, that certifies that you know the base minimum of what an interpreter or a translator should or would need to do the job properly. Looking at this, I'd actually qualify as a study affiliate, so it's £27. And then becoming a study affiliate puts you on track to become a career affiliate, which would then later lead to becoming an associate member. But unless I would do the study affiliate, I would pay for an affiliation, like a membership fee for something like this, only if it gave me access to very specific information on how to do translation or interpretation. That's the only reason I would do it. Because in that way I would have access to standard material that I know would actually have some sort of benefit in learning from, rather than just sitting around and going through YouTube videos and learning about these things where you're not any more certified after watching a YouTube video. Believe me, I know, I get it. Good for broad-based general information, but in terms of learning what these organizations want or they expect, paying for membership in one of these institutes might be one of the ideas, one of the things to pursue. They give you some background, some information on how to best approach translation. So there's a few different translation techniques that they have available, or that you can employ. So there's direct translation, where you're like borrowing words. Calc, which is you're borrowing a phrase or directly translating it word for word, and then literal translation as well. There's indirect translation, where you're changing the sequence parts of the speech, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you have ever studied Mandarin Chinese or like even Russian, or Latin would be a good example of this, where they shift the location of the verb, or they cluster a certain type of words or parts of speech here in this sentence, and then they chunk it together in a different manner than another culture might do. I've heard that English and Chinese are very similar because it's subject, verb, object, which is not entirely true. It's like some of the subjects in Mandarin can be long, and then you have your verb, which has some qualifier to it, and then your object, which also can have a qualifier, and then where do you put the timestamp? So in English, there's a certain way of doing it. In Mandarin Chinese, there's a certain way of doing it as well. Likewise with Russian. So where you're using a different phrase, so you're changing the sequence parts of speech, means that you're able to rearrange that sentence in a way that can best fit the translation, comprehension in your target language. So in indirect, again, there's modulation, using a different phrase to convey the same meaning. Reformulation of equivalents, so translating idioms or proverbs. Adaptation, expressing something in a more familiar way in the target language. So you might hear, when you're, this is translation, so you're reading a text, you come across and you're going, okay, that I understand what's happening, but if I were to translate it word for word, it would be more like this in that culture rather than what this culture is referring to in that language. There's also compensation, and this is where, like if you're translating the names of official bodies, like, I guess one of the things is that what I hear, like in Mandarin Chinese, there's the Ministry of whatever, like Ministry of Education, and it sounds very formal, but the words that they're using in Mandarin Chinese are the words that refer to a body that administers this work. And so, and you'll hear it all over, and they just label it all the same thing. It's the same with I think Russian does the same as well. But so like a government body that, you know, there's probably there's probably an equivalent somewhere else in the world. There's always going to be like a ministry or an institute, center for education, or you know, the official government center for education or something along those lines. So compensating where you're using a different place name in the target text. The overall goal, so with the training, what they say is that, I mean, and this again goes back to just because you know two languages doesn't mean you're always able to become a translator or an interpreter. So one of the goals for the DipTrans certificate is accuracy, appropriacy, authenticity, being acceptable, and then providing extra information if necessary. So you do have to be accurate in your translations. It has to be appropriate for the situation that you're doing. It has to be authentic, so you can't be changing things because you feel some way. It has to be acceptable, so that if someone else heard you translating, they would agree with what how you're translating it. And then providing any extra information if necessary. So brackets, you know, or that dash line that you can give a little bit more information. Keep in mind, again, this is for translation. Interpretation would be similar, but it would be more on the spot. There's much more high pressure, higher stakes, I guess you would say. Interpretation, very similar, but again, more demanding because it takes place in a live environment rather than translation, where you can do it on your own. For both of these, it's best to have to belong to an organization. It just ensures, especially for interpretation, not so much for translation, although yes, it does exist in translation. But if you're an interpreter and belong to a organization, it also gives you some sort of credits for being like a certain level of security. So you meet some sort of security or safety requirements as well. I see that the fees are higher, the membership fees for the interpretation at the ITI. So this is the Institute of Translation and Interpreting. This is, so again, this is in the UK, I believe that they're based. Yeah, Milton Keynes in the UK. And so their membership, they have membership like individual, and then they have corporate. Student is £49, so it's what, $100 Canadian. Affiliate is £110, so it's 220 Canadian or so. I'm not sure what the exchange rate's for pound to Canadian dollar right now, but generally you double it, and it goes up from there. So it's basically $49 as your cheapest, and then $110 as your next step after that. After that, it gets into associate qualified academic. So again, those would be your professors who are studying or teaching this sort of stuff at the university level. Corporate would be because like a company would apply for that membership. So you're a translation service and you offer your services, and that's what they could certify you. They also have assessment fees. Standard translator assessment fee is £389. $800 to be told that you can do something. Same with qualifications supported assessment. I guess that's where you can provide like a portfolio instead. And so all these, you can get a detailed report fee, which that'd be kind of interesting to get. Boy, would they ever rip apart your language, wouldn't they? I'm not sure. Good question. The other thing that they make clear here is that the assessment fee covers one combination of source and target language. So it's like Spanish to English would be one language combination. English to Spanish, even though you know both languages, it's a different language combination. Therefore, you got to pay 2 assessment fees. Cash grab? So that's one other thing. It's part of going through the process of becoming a translator and interpreter is paying some of these fees. One interesting thing I came across was on the Canadian government website. This is actually the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada, because this actually is one of those places where you might think of applying if you are an immigrant, or if you're second generation, first generation living in Canada, or United States, or any one of these places, looking at the immigration authorities to apply for as a job, because they're going to pay well. You're going to get the standard rate. The working hours will probably be kind of cool, probably pretty good, but you're probably going to hear a lot of stuff that you don't want to talk about afterwards. I'm just assuming. They have a whole booklet, and I'll put the links here on my website later on for you to have a look. But you can look for this. This is the Interpreter Handbook from the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada, and it's quite lengthy. They go through some of the things that you're supposed to do, and similar to the other websites that I mentioned for the memberships and the institutes, what's needed. It gives you a whole job breakdown, a whole very detailed analysis of what you're going to be doing and what's expected of you if you're in a role of interpretation or translation. This is more for interpretation, though, rather than translation. And this would be probably along the lines of doing like court translations. So this is like, not judiciary. Is it judiciary? It's a lot more formal. It's a lot more... a lot bigger than doing university translations for most things. But they have a whole breakdown here, and one of the things I thought it would be interesting, they actually have ensure fairness, interpret accurately, do's and don'ts, so they have both of them as well. Interpret only the words you have been asked to interpret, no more, no less. Don't summarize, paraphrase, condense, or exaggerate. Very important. Do interpret in the same person as the speaker. For example, if the speaker says I will, interpret it as I will, not as he, she will. So don't change the person, because if you start doing that, then that could change the meaning of what's being said. Don't preface your interpretation with she said or he said. Good point. Yeah, because you're standing there going, someone's looking at you going, well, she said I will. And you're going, now the interpreter is like, well, wait a minute. Did she say I will? Is she quoting someone or is she not? So translate it as you hear it. Do inform the decision maker if no direct interpretation for a word exists, or if you can't remember the meaning of a word used. So you're actually given that sort of that leeway to, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what this means. You could probably ask for clarification in that situation. Don't make up an alternative terminology. Don't just make shit up. Bad idea. Do reflect exactly what is said. Don't give an approximation, so probably best to ask for clarification. Do correct yourself immediately if you realize that you have made a mistake or if a mistake is pointed out. So don't be lenient with errors. So you do actually have to be on it, and you have to be aware of, like, if you think you've made a mistake, correct yourself quickly, because that could lead to a misinterpretation of what's going on, a misunderstanding of what's happening, especially for something in the immigration board where it's a lot more formal than in other situations. And of course, they give you some examples of what you can expect from an IRB, Immigration and Refugee Board. There we go. Some pointers: dress appropriately, how to conduct yourself, things like that. One thing I thought was interesting is that they give you some. This is actually where it gets a lot more useful, a lot more interesting, about how to improve your memory and sight translation skills. They have a few exercises, not too many, because I guess it's not their job to train you. You're supposed to be trained going into this job. So if you have this training and you apply for the Immigration and Refugee Board, then you take their exercises here and you're able to add on to your current knowledge that you have. So exercise 1: read a text. Repeat each sentence after having read it without referring back to the test. It is easier if you can get someone else to read it to you. So it's like repetition almost. But they read a sentence and then you respond to it, or sorry, you don't respond, you repeat it right afterwards. That'd be difficult. I'm not sure if I could do that in Chinese. If someone gave me a sentence, would I be able to repeat exactly what was said to me, word for word, tone for tone too? It's a good challenge. Exercise number 2, have someone read a sentence aloud from a newspaper or magazine at normal speaking speed. Take notes. Repeat what you've heard in the same language using your notes and memory. Number 4, analyze the results. Have you left anything out? So this is actually, this is what a lot of us teachers do, a lot of us educators. We do this in class all the time. Take notes, listen, take notes, and now fill in the blanks, which is a form of note-taking and memory test. So that's what they offer you, those 2 exercises to be able to do that can help your mental recall, as they say. They do suggest don't practice a new note-taking system while working in a proceeding. Don't try anything new. Do what works. Do something new only if you have the time, like on your own time. At work, do what works. Sight translation. You, as an IRB interpreter, you might be asked to translate aloud a variety of documents for the tribunal. So it could be identity document like IDs, passports, driver's licenses, birth certificates, things like that. So that would be like sight translation. You are able, you can ask for some time to review the document ahead of time to prepare a rough written translation. So if you've never seen it or you haven't seen that type of script before, it could be something that you could have, that you'll have some time to review and go, okay, I know what this is. I just have to understand what this particular document is saying. And then for an exercise to practice your sight translation, they suggest you do translate a short text orally. Practice this until you can do this at a normal speaking speed. Concentrate on giving an intelligible and an accurate rendering of what the text says. And they say don't be satisfied until you've reached a stage where no one realizes you are translating. Well, if you're a perfectionist, how does that work? When practicing exercise number 1, start with the simple texts, of course, and use vocabulary that you're familiar with. So don't try to use all the big words, which is, as a student and as a teacher, you hear this quite a bit where students try to use these big words and it doesn't always, it breaks up their fluency and it is very disjointing to listen to. And then the final example or final thing they say is like the best way to ensure that you'll provide good quality is just to practice a lot, as much as you can. As an independent contractor, you might not be called by the IRB on a regular basis. So you have to maintain your skills on your own. So you're not actually even a full-time job. This is contract work for the government, which makes sense, I guess. Even though they have lots of immigrants and refugees applying all the time, but I guess you don't always need an interpreter. especially if the immigrant or the refugee knows English, going to Canada, or French, of course. And so that is a pretty good overview of those things. The one last thing that I was looking at today, because so a national body would be one place to go to. The other place that would be sort of a no-brainer to apply for if you're a translator or interpreter is the UN. And I've heard that this is sort of like this is your bigs. That's the big leagues already, because with the UN, you're now, if you get into not just translation, but especially interpretation, that's your high stakes, high level type of stuff. Imagine like all those, same with the European Union, same thing would be there. Those meetings that they broadcast on TV that no one really watches, those are all being translated. They're all being interpreted at the same time. Like you have you see the people of the suits behind them, and like an oval behind them, there is a whole army of art students, interpreters, and translators that are simultaneously listening and interpreting and translating and doing researching, taking notes and everything, going through the whole gamut, sitting through all of those speeches and translating word for word what they are hearing. So it can be very, it's high level, high stakes, I guess you can say. Recruitment process. So just going to take a look at the exams so in order to become a UN interpreter and translator, you have to go to their website, which is, it's all right. It's very, you can get it in a few different languages as well, because the languages that are used, they had it written down. Where is it? They had... The official languages of the UN are what? You have English, Chinese, Arabic, Russian, Spanish, French. Is there another one? I think those are it. I might be missing one. I'm sorry if I am. But they have a language careers website that you can go to, and by language professionals, they mean like specialists like interpreters, translators, editors, verbatim reporters, terminologists, reference assistants, and copy preparers, proofreaders, production editors. So there's a lot of different language professionals that they employ. They have a lot of people working at the Department for General Assembly and Conference Management in New York, Geneva, Vienna, and Nairobi. And of course at the regional commissions at Addis Ababa, Bangkok, Beirut, Geneva, and Santiago. Neat. They have offices all over the place. Crazy cool. One of the things that how are language professionals recruited? Competitive examinations. So you will actually have to do an exam, and I'm sure it's not easy to do this. I will show you one of the exams I found on one of those institutes' website just in a bit. But here, so you're given a competitive exam, and what happens is that you're placed on rosters for recruitment and hired as and when job vacancies arise. So again, you might be waiting a while. It might be contract work, so you might not be working full-time for the UN, and it's only going to be if there's a major conference going on in town. How you get like an office job as a translator, I'm not sure. They don't really mention how to do that. Everyone's encouraged to apply. Nationalities and citizenship doesn't matter to them. They don't care. So what kind of background is needed? Not all recruits have backgrounds in languages. Some of them are journalism, law, economics, and can even be engineering or medicine, because the UN does deal with a law, like a broad base of subjects and situations all the time. So they need people from all walks of life. But they do have, this is where actually it kind of breaks down here. Let's see, recruitment process. Exams for interpreters. Recruitment process. You got to take a competitive exam, first level degree from a university or institution of equivalent status. A lot of interpreters also have a degree from an accredited school interpretation. So you went to university, studied like languages, like linguistics or something like that, and then you went to one of those interpretation accredited schools or an institute wherein you have learned the tools of the trade of actually how to interpret or translate. Candidates must be able to interpret from 1 to 2 official languages into their main language. And the main language, they clarify what they mean by this. The main language is the language of an individual's higher education. For linguists outside the organization, main language is usually mean to take the target language into which an individual works. So for me, it would be English because that's the language I would be translating into, rather than something like, I don't know, Mandarin. That wouldn't be me. I wouldn't be, translating into Mandarin. That'd be tough. For me, it would be very difficult. So what are these interpreters asked to do for the UN? Examinations for interpreters, they're asked to interpret speeches of increasing difficulty in terms of complexity and speed of delivery from each of their source languages. So they could be doing a number of languages. Each speech is about 5 to 10 minutes long. Oof. They must be able to demonstrate excellent passive comprehension of their source language, 1 or 2 official languages. Accuracy, which means also grammatically correct manner. Ability to construct complete sentences. You have to finish the sentence. Good idea. An understanding of the appropriate style and register, so matching, like if they're being very formal or informal, you have to be able to match that. Ability to keep up with the speed, so you can't get too far behind or you're losing it. Intelligent editing of logically redundant words and phrases. So if someone keeps on saying you know what I mean, do you have to interpret that? I think we get it. Ability to cope with difficult or dense passages, so something that's very involved or complicated, and good diction and delivery. So you have to be able to speak well as well, and not be. I'm guessing stuttering might be an issue, but also being able to not be shy of delivering that message. You can't be like, I don't feel comfortable saying that. You're interpreters. Your job is to translate the language. If they fail to interpret any speech in a satisfactory manner, are automatically eliminated. Successful candidates are convoked. What does that mean? Convoked to a competency-based interview. That means that you're invited, I guess. You're brought into a competency-based interview, which means you passed stage 1, now stage 2. Are you competent in what you're doing? So yeah, that's kind of what you have to do to become an interpreter and a translator for the UN. Kind of neat to see that they have it, that they have all this information. They could actually give a little bit more. Do they have any job openings? Let's see if they do. Field services, internships, so librarians. Oh, wow, there's lots here. They don't really have any. How can I sort this? Professional? No. Job network? Logistics, transport management. So department office. I'd want translation or would you? Oh, you'd work across everything, wouldn't you? Oh boy, interesting. So you'd have to actually. Let's try field service, and we'll search that. Information, air operations assistance, things like that. Investigation assistant, that would not be translated. Well, I guess maybe. Oh, good question. Well, that's not, I'm not sure how to exactly search all of that, so might not be as easy to find field services. So they've broken up. What they've done here is that they have 5 different categories: professional and higher categories, field services, general services and related categories, national professional officers, and internships. So internships you might not get paid for. National professional would be sort of nation-specific in one of their offices. General services and related categories is general. Field services, so you're put out to the field, like you might be probably freelance in that situation. Professional and higher categories I'm guessing that's where you are actually working in one of their offices, that you would need to be in one of those cities and have the proper visa requirements and all that stuff, right? Travel assistant. Yeah, I don't know about that. Okay. Well, I mean, it's out there. The UN careers. I guess you'd have to sift through it. To editor English. Okay, let's see what this says. Editor English, United Core Values. Yes, of course. Editor English, Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, duty station, Bangkok. Posting period, May 19th to July 2nd. Okay, so responsibilities, you edit text of a specialized or technical nature, consults with other departments, with author departments, works closely with the proofreaders, formatters, etc. Provides information, yeah, so competencies, education, first level degree from a university or institution of equivalent status. Candidates for this position must have passed the relevant United Nations competitive examination for editors. So it means you already had to have applied already. Work experience, a minimum of 2 years experience in editing with the United Nations. Oh, already not qualified. Experience with web-based applications, experience editing in-session documentation, experience delivering training to clients or engaging outreach activities is also desirable. So you need to know English, of course. So that's just the editor English job posting on the United Nations website right now. The one thing, so I was looking at some of the websites for Canada, and I mentioned before that there are two major, so the national body for Canada actually is a sort of a body that just sort of recognizes the other provincial organizations. So it's like a network, a focal point for the network that is each provincial translating and interpreting body. To give you an idea, so after you take your institute your institute education, you've paid your membership fee, or maybe you just paying the student membership fees, you want to work for the UN or something like that. How do you actually become a proper translator or interpreter? So there are a few different, there's two main ways basically. And this is what I'm looking at here is the ATIM, Association of Translators, Terminologists, and Interpreters of Manitoba. Hello, Manitoba, Canada. And so what's needed in order to become a member? You can pay a study fee, a student fee, or a study fee that gets you into the door, basically, and then you can get onto the process of being certified by the board itself. Certification by examination, certification by portfolio. So you have to obtain the certification in the discipline by challenging 1 CITIC's standard certification examinations. They are aimed at professionals who want to be peer assessed, have their skills peer assessed. Moving down, so getting past all the education because they want a degree in translation or 1 full year. So here's where the education, certification, whatever, how do you actually get it? What is the idea of equivalent 1 year professional translation service? Here, they actually give you some numbers here, which are great to see. To calculate professional experience, the equivalents are applied. 1 year of full-time professional experience is equivalent to the translation of 112,500 words per year in the official languages. So it'd be in Canada, it'd be English and French. 80,000 words a year in Spanish, and then 25,000 words a year in other languages. So I'm guessing that would be Mandarin Chinese. 1 year of part-time professional experience is equivalent to the translation of 50,000 words a year, official languages, 32,000 words a year in Spanish, and 10,000 words a year in other languages on average. So again, that would probably be Mandarin Chinese in there. Again, that's translation. So you're reading a text, you're translating it into your target language. That would mean I would have to, if I want to do this full-time, professional experience, I would have to find some sort of way of getting paid to, or an internship, volunteer my work, my time to translate 25,000 words of Chinese into English every year. That's a lot. I don't know if I can do that just yet. Part-time would be 10,000. So could I read an essay, dissertation or something and translate it into English? One of those a year. How long would it take me to translate 10,000 words? Well, if it took me an hour to translate the texts in my HSK 5 books, those are 500 words each, times 2, so 1,000 words every 2 days. That's 2 hours. That would take me a long time to do. 20 days, I guess. So 1,000 words, yeah. Well, so technically, an hour a day, you would be able to do that in about a month, just over a month maybe, to hit that part-time professional experience. But it has to be in a professional context. It can't just be like you sitting down and doing translations on your own. I'm guessing there has to be some sort of verification that it's actually what you're doing has some sort of that someone's paying you for it or something like that, along that lines, or you're working for somebody else in that capacity. So those numbers are great to know, like how long you have to spend each year and how many words you have to translate. Let's take a look at so this is translation certification by portfolio. So this is a little bit different, and where they give you, it's a little, so if you don't want to take an exam or you don't have an exam, this would be sort of if they've sort of grown up in dual language households and they're just like, all I do is I know Chinese, I know English, I know Ukrainian, I know English. I mean, I translate books on my free time all the time just because I think it's fun. Those people can apply by certification by portfolio. A little bit more complicated. It costs $400 to apply. Oof, geez. Strict criteria evaluated by an ad hoc committee, so it just means they choose who's available at that moment. And so again, this is for the province of Manitoba in Canada, but the other provinces would have similar sort of requirements. You need your CV, confirmation of length of employment from other employers or clients, 10 examples of translation work, minimum of 500 words each with their source texts, proof and testimonials from clients and employers confirming that you actually did it, and then any other documents that are needed. To calculate, again, so you have to have the equivalent of 2 full years of full-time translation experience. So again, going back into those numbers that I said before, 113,000 words in an official language, French or English, 80,000 in Spanish, 25,000 words in other languages, on average for 2 years if you are applying for certification by portfolio. If you don't have a recognized degree in translation or a related field, you have to submit more documents and stuff like that, copies, diplomas and degrees and transcripts of your what you did actually study. And again, so it's the same sort of requirements. So the translation minimum, I guess, is 113,000 words per year if it's considered full time, 50,000 words in English or French if you're doing it part time, or 10,000 words part-time in something like Mandarin Chinese, or 25,000 if it's full-time. Crazy requirements. So that was a good little introduction. I know it was a lengthy conversation, but we took a look at quite a few websites here, starting with the Futurelearn website, the introductory course that they have available to people if they want to dip their toe into translation and interpretation. And then we moved into a couple of institutes based in the UK that offer certification, memberships, and also as well in Canada, the memberships that you can pay and become part of to ensure that you are providing sort of a standard level of acceptable business professionalism and quality of translation and interpretation. We also made the clarification that interpretation, translation are two different things. They have different skill sets. They're similar, but they're very different in that translation, you typically are given a lot more time to translate things, even if it means you have a deadline later on, whereas interpretation often means that you are doing it simultaneously or at least consecutively, very close to when the source material is given to you. And one of the places that you would be utilizing these skills, I mentioned the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada, so a government body such as that, or the UN in a more international situation there, a scenario wherein you are dealing with you could be working in one of the field offices or around the world, and you're probably going to be dealing with a lot more of an international body itself. Lots covered. I hope that was helpful, and that you guys were able to sort of get a better understanding of, if I want to be a translator or an interpreter, can I do it just because I study these languages? For me, it's, I'm studying Mandarin Chinese and Russian, a little bits and pieces of other languages, of course Ukrainian. If I know this stuff, how well do I have to know it, and then what else do I have to do to become a translator in those situations? And it's not so easy as just being bilingual or trilingual. It's a little bit more that you actually have to go through further examinations in some higher stress circumstances, and whether or not you actually like the work as well, I think, is a very important consideration to think about if you're going to become one of these people, these translators or interpreters. All right, folks, show notes up on my website, stevensersky.com. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Best of luck with your studies. Bye-bye.